The signal came from a place so far away that the light from its star had been traveling for 47 years before it reached human eyes. It arrived at the Deep Space Monitoring Station on Europa, one of the frozen moons of Jupiter, where a small team of scientists spent their days listening to the endless silence of the universe. Lieutenant Grace Holloway was drinking her third cup of coffee when her console started beeping. She had been working the night shift for 6 months, and in all that time, she had never heard anything but static and the occasional burst of radiation from a distant pulsar. But this was different. This was a pattern. She put down her coffee and leaned forward, her heart beating faster as the computer tried to make sense of the incoming data. The signal repeated itself every 37 seconds, a complex series of tones that rose and fell like music. It was not random. It was not natural. Someone, somewhere, had sent this message on purpose. "Commander Mercer," she called out, her voice shaking slightly. "You need to see this right now." Commander Jack Mercer had been sleeping in the small quarters behind the main control room. He was a tall man in his 50s, with gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too many false alarms over the years. But when he looked at the data on Grace's screen, those tired eyes went wide. "Run it through the translation program," he said quietly. The program had been developed 20 years ago, based on mathematical principles that scientists believed would be universal to any intelligent species. It took the computer several minutes to work through the alien mathematics, breaking down the signal into its basic components and rebuilding it into something humans could understand. When the translation appeared on the screen, Grace felt her blood run cold. The message said, "We are dying. The Krath have come. They have surrounded our world. We cannot fight them. We cannot run. If anyone can hear this, please help us. We are the Veluxy of the third planet of the star you call Kepler 442. Please, anyone, help." Grace and Commander Mercer stared at the screen in silence. For decades, humanity had wondered if they were alone in the universe. Now they had their answer. They were not alone. And somewhere out there, an entire species was begging for help. Commander Mercer picked up the communication device and contacted Earth. Within 2 hours, the message had reached the highest levels of government. Within 4 hours, the United Earth Coalition had called an emergency meeting. Leaders from every nation gathered in the Great Assembly Hall, their faces grim as they listened to the translation played over and over again. Admiral Patricia Vance stood at the front of the room. She was 63 years old, with silver hair pulled back in a tight bun and a face that showed no emotion. She had spent her entire life preparing for a moment like this, though she had never truly believed it would come. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, her voice steady and calm, "we have received a distress signal from an alien civilization approximately 47 light years from Earth. The species calls themselves the Veluxy. They are under attack by another species called the Krath. Based on the signal's content, we believe the Veluxy are facing extinction." The room erupted in noise. Some leaders demanded more information. Others wanted to know how this was even possible. A few insisted it must be a hoax or a mistake. Admiral Vance raised her hand for silence. "We have verified the signal's authenticity. It is real. The question now is simple. What do we do about it?" A man from the European delegation stood up. "With respect, Admiral, what can we do? We have never traveled beyond our own solar system. We have no idea what we might face out there. Surely the sensible course is to wait and observe." Admiral Vance nodded slowly. "That is one option. We could ignore this signal. We could pretend we never heard it. We could hope that whoever the Krath are, they never find out about us." She paused and looked around the room. "But let me ask you something. If Earth was dying, if we were the ones sending that message into the darkness, wouldn't we want someone to answer?" The room fell silent. The truth was that humanity had been preparing for this moment longer than most people realized. The Terran Expeditionary Fleet had been built in secret over the past 30 years, hidden in the asteroid belt beyond Mars. 12 warships, each one capable of folding space itself and traveling faster than light. They had been designed for exploration, for defense, for the day when humanity would finally step out into the galaxy. That day had arrived, sooner than anyone expected. The vote took less than an hour. Every nation, every leader, every representative raised their hand in agreement. They would answer the signal. They would send the fleet. They would find out what was happening to the Veluxy, and they would help if they could. Admiral Vance sent the orders that same night. The fleet would launch in 72 hours. On the monitoring station on Europa, Grace Holloway sat alone at her console. The signal was still coming in, repeating its desperate message every 37 seconds. She wondered what the Veluxy looked like. She wondered if they had families, children, dreams for the future. She wondered how many of them were still alive, and she wondered what would happen when humanity finally met another species face to face, across the solar system. In the hidden shipyards of the asteroid belt, crews were waking up and preparing for launch. Engineers ran final checks on the fold space engines. Marines loaded weapons and supplies. Medical officers stocked their sick bays with every medicine and tool they might need. Captain Daniel Shaw stood on the bridge of the Valkyrie's Wrath, the flagship of the Terran Expeditionary Fleet. He was 41 years old, with dark hair and calm brown eyes that never seemed to show fear. He had trained his entire adult life for this moment, and now that it had come, he felt strangely peaceful. His executive officer, Commander Nina Rios, stepped onto the bridge behind him. She was younger than Shaw, with sharp features and a quick mind that had earned her a reputation as one of the best tactical officers in the fleet. "Captain," she said, "all ships report ready for launch. We're just waiting for your order." Shaw looked out at the stars through the viewport. Somewhere out there, 47 light years away, an entire civilization was waiting for a miracle. "Tell the fleet to prepare for fold space jump," he said quietly. "We have a call to answer." The engines hummed to life. The stars began to blur. And for the first time in human history, a fleet of warships left the solar system behind and headed out into the unknown. Darkness of the galaxy. The signal kept repeating. "Help us. Please. Anyone." Humanity was on its way. The journey through fold space took 3 weeks. For the crew of the 12 Terran warships, it was a time of preparation, training, and quiet fear. No human had ever traveled this far from home. No human knew what waited for them at the end of the journey. Captain Daniel Shaw spent most of his time on the bridge of the Valkyrie's Wrath, reviewing tactical reports and studying everything the scientists back on Earth had been able to learn about the Veluxy and the Krath. There was not much to go on. The distress signal had contained only basic information, and humanity had no other records of either species. What they did know was troubling. The Krath appeared to be a military empire that conquered other worlds and enslaved their populations. They had technology that allowed them to travel between stars, which meant they were at least as advanced as humanity. Possibly more. Commander Nina Rios walked onto the bridge with a datapad in her hand. She had barely slept in days, and dark circles had formed under her eyes. But her voice was steady and her mind was sharp. "Intelligence report from Earth," she said, handing Shaw the datapad. "They've been analyzing the signal in more detail. The Veluxy are described as avian, which means they evolved from bird-like creatures. They appear to be a peaceful species with no military tradition. They've been spacefaring for about 300 years, but they've never developed weapons technology." Shaw read through the report in silence. "So they have no way to defend themselves." "None at all. The Krath showed up about 2 months ago with a fleet of 30 warships. They surrounded the Veluxy homeworld and demanded complete surrender. When the Veluxy refused, the Krath began destroying orbital stations and shooting down any ship that tried to escape. And the Veluxy just started broadcasting their distress signal, hoping someone would hear it. Reyes nodded. It was a long shot. The signal has been traveling for weeks. By the time we received it, the situation could have already ended. For all we know, we might arrive to find nothing but ruins. Shaw set down the datapad and looked out at the swirling colors of fold space through the viewport. Then, we need to be ready for anything. In the lower decks of the ship, the Marines were training hard. Sergeant Carlos Mendez led his squad through combat drills every morning and every evening. They practiced boarding actions, close quarters fighting, and emergency medical procedures. They ran until their legs burned and their lungs screamed for air. They trained until their bodies moved without thinking. Mendez was a large man with broad shoulders and hands that could crush metal. He had grown up in a small town in Texas, and he had joined the military at 18 because he believed in protecting people who could not protect themselves. Now, at 35, he was about to put that belief to the ultimate test. "Listen up," he told his squad during a break in training. "We don't know what these Krath look like. We don't know how they fight. We don't know what weapons they use. But I can tell you one thing for certain. They've never faced humans before. They've never fought a species that evolved on a death world." One of the younger Marines, a woman named Private First Class Amy Lawson, raised her hand. "Sergeant, what exactly does that mean? Death world?" Mendez smiled grimly. "It means that Earth is one of the most dangerous planets in the galaxy. Most intelligent species evolve on stable worlds with calm weather, few predators, and gentle environments. Not us. We come from a planet with hurricanes, earthquakes, volcanoes, and ice ages. We evolved alongside lions, wolves, sharks, and snakes. Our bodies are built to survive injuries that would kill most other species. We can run for hours without stopping. We can heal from wounds that should be fatal. We can adapt to almost any environment." He looked around at his squad. The Krath have been conquering peaceful species for who knows how long. They've probably never met anything that fights back. Well, they're about to meet us. And they're going to learn what it means to face a death world predator. Down in the medical bay, Dr. Samuel Grant was preparing for the worst. He had served as a combat medic for 15 years before becoming the chief medical officer of the Valkyrie's Wrath. And he knew that battles were won as much in the hospital as on the battlefield. His team had stocked every cabinet with supplies. They had practiced emergency surgeries until they could perform them with their eyes closed. They had studied what little information was available about Veluxy biology, preparing to treat alien patients if necessary. Dr. Grant was a quiet man with gentle hands and sad eyes. He had seen too much death in his career, and he hoped this mission would not add to that burden. But he was realistic. They were flying toward a war zone. People were going to get hurt. In the engineering section, Chief Engineer Maria Santos was running final diagnostics on the fold space engines. She was a small woman with gray hair and a temper that could melt steel. She had designed half of the systems on the Valkyrie's Wrath, and she knew every wire, every circuit, every bolt in the ship. "The engines are holding steady," she reported to Captain Shaw over the communication system. "We should exit fold space in about 6 hours. I recommend we drop out at the edge of the system and approach slowly. Give ourselves time to assess the situation." Shaw agreed with her recommendation. They would not charge in blindly. They would observe, gather information, and then decide how to act. The final hours passed slowly. Crew members wrote letters to their families, knowing that if the mission went badly, those letters might be the last words their loved ones ever heard from them. Some prayed. Some exercised. Some simply sat in silence, lost in their own thoughts. Captain Shaw called a final briefing for all department heads. They gathered in the conference room, their faces tense but determined. "In a few hours, we will exit Fold Space and enter the Veluxy system," Shaw said. "We do not know what we will find. The Krath may have already destroyed the Veluxy. They may have left the system entirely. Or they may still be there, waiting for us." He paused and looked at each person in the room. "I want to be clear about something. We are not here to start a war. We are here to help people who asked for our help. If we can resolve this peacefully, we will. But if the Krath force us to fight, we will show them exactly what humanity is capable of." The meeting ended, and the officers returned to their stations. The countdown continued. When the Valkyrie's Wrath finally dropped out of Fold Space, the bridge crew fell silent. There, filling the viewport, was a beautiful blue-green planet covered in clouds and oceans. The Veluxy homeworld. And surrounding it, like a ring of black steel, were 30 Krath warships. The blockade was still in place. The Veluxy were still alive. And humanity had arrived just in time. Captain Shaw straightened in his command chair and took a deep breath. "Open a channel to all ships," he said quietly. "Tell the fleet to form up on the flagship and prepare for battle." The war for the stars was about to begin. Sovereign Vreth had been commanding the Krath blockade for 2 months, and in all that time, nothing interesting had happened. The Veluxy were a weak species, unable to fight back against his fleet. They had refused to surrender, which Vreth found annoying but ultimately meaningless. Eventually, they would run out of food and water. Eventually, they would beg for mercy. And then the Krath Dominion would add another world to its empire. Vreth was a large creature, standing nearly 8 feet tall, with scales the color of dark green jade. His eyes were yellow and cold, and his mouth was filled with teeth designed for tearing flesh. The Krath had evolved as predators on their homeworld, and they had carried that predator instinct with them into the stars. He was reviewing supply reports when his sensor officer suddenly shouted in alarm, "Sovereign!" Unknown contacts dropping out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. 12 vessels, configuration unknown. Vreth rose from his command throne and stalked toward the main viewing screen. The display showed 12 small dots moving slowly toward the planet. They were traveling in a tight formation, their energy signatures unlike anything in Krath records. "Identify them," Vreth commanded. The sensor officer worked frantically at his console. "I cannot, Sovereign. They do not match any known species. They are broadcasting on all frequencies, but we cannot understand their language." A new voice spoke from the communication station. "Sovereign, they are attempting to translate their broadcast into our language. The translation is coming through now." The screen flickered, and suddenly Vreth found himself looking at something he had never seen before. It was a creature with smooth skin, the color of bronze, 2 forward-facing eyes, and dark hair cut short. It wore some kind of uniform with symbols Vreth did not recognize. The creature spoke, and the translation system converted its words into Krath language. "This is Captain Daniel Shaw of the Terran Expeditionary Fleet. We received a distress signal from the Veluxy people. You will stand down your blockade and withdraw from this system, or we will remove you by force." Vreth stared at the screen in disbelief. Then he began to laugh. It was a hissing, rattling sound that made his crew uncomfortable, but none of them dared to speak. 12 ships, Vreth said when his laughter faded. "You bring 12 ships against my 30 and demand that I withdraw? You are either very brave or very stupid." The creature on the screen did not flinch. Its expression remained calm and steady. "We are human," it said. "Usually we are both." Vreth's amusement vanished. He had conquered 17 species in his career, and none of them had ever spoken to him with such casual confidence. It was irritating, It was disrespectful. It needed to be corrected. "Fire on them," he ordered. "Destroy every ship. Let them be a lesson to anyone else who might think of interfering with the Krath Dominion." The Krath fleet opened fire. 30 warships unleashed their weapons at once, sending a wave of energy beams and missiles toward the Terran fleet. It was enough firepower to destroy a small moon. It should have ended the battle before it began. It did not. Captain Shaw watched the incoming attack on his tactical display with calm eyes. "All ships, raise shields and prepare to return fire," he said. "Weapons officer, target the lead Krath vessel. Fire when ready." Lieutenant Kyle Bennett had been waiting for this moment. His fingers danced across the weapons console, locking onto the largest Krath ship in the formation. The railguns hummed with power as electromagnetic coils accelerated tungsten slugs to incredible speeds. "Firing," he said. The railgun rounds hit the Krath flagship like fists from an angry god. The first slug punched through the enemy shields as if they were made of paper. The second tore a massive hole in the hull. The third struck the engine section and turned it into a ball of fire and debris. Sovereign Vreth watched in horror as his flagship died around him. Alarm screamed. Crew members ran in panic. The lights flickered and went dark. "What is happening?" he roared. "What weapons are they using?" No one could answer him. The Krath had never encountered kinetic weapons before. Their shields were designed to stop energy beams, not solid projectiles traveling at a fraction of the speed of light. They had no defense against humanity's brutal, simple approach to warfare. The Terran fleet moved through the Krath formation like wolves among sheep. The Valkyrie's Wrath led the attack, its railguns firing constantly. Behind it, the other 11 warships spread out and engaged targets of their own. Commander Nina Reyes coordinated the battle from her station on the bridge. "Target 3 is down. Target 7 is retreating. Target 12 has lost engine power." Shaw nodded grimly. "Keep pressing. Don't give them time to regroup." In the missile base, crews loaded antimatter warheads into launch tubes. These were humanity's most devastating weapons, capable of converting matter directly into energy. When they struck Krath vessels, entire ships simply ceased to exist. The battle lasted less than 20 minutes. When it was over, 15 Krath ships had been destroyed, and 8 more were too damaged to fight. The remaining 7 were fleeing toward the edge of the system. Their engines pushed to maximum power on the crippled remains of the Krath flagship. Sovereign Vreth pulled himself from the wreckage of his command throne. His body was broken, his scales cracked and bleeding. Around him, his crew lay dead or dying. "Send a message to the Dominion," he whispered to the one surviving officer he could find. "Tell them what happened here. Tell them about the humans. Tell them to send everything we have." Then he collapsed, and darkness took him. Captain Shaw watched the surviving Krath ships disappear into fold space. He felt no joy in the victory, only a grim satisfaction that the mission had succeeded. The blockade was broken. The Veluxy homeworld was safe. "Commander Reyes," he said, "take us into orbit around the planet. Prepare a shuttle for first contact." Reyes nodded. "Yes, Captain. What should I tell the crew?" Shaw thought for a moment. They had just fought humanity's first interstellar battle. They had won against superior numbers. They had proven that the species from the death world called Earth was not to be underestimated. "Tell them well done," he said finally. "Tell them this is just the beginning." Below, on the surface of the Veluxy homeworld, billions of feather beings watched the battle in their sky with disbelief. For 2 months, they had lived in terror, waiting for the end. They had sent their desperate message into the void, expecting nothing but silence. Instead, someone had answered. Someone had come. Someone had saved them. The Veluxy did not know who these strange, flat-faced creatures were. They did not know where they had come from or what they wanted. But as the Krath fleet burned and scattered, one thing was clear. The universe had just changed forever. High Counselor Theron stood in the ruins of the Planetary Communications Center and watched the final Krath ship vanish from the sensors. Tears streamed down the feathers of his face. "Prepare a greeting party," he said to his advisors. "Whoever these beings are, we owe them everything. It is time to meet our saviors." Above the planet, the Terran fleet moved into orbit. Shuttles prepared for launch. History prepared to be made. First contact was about to begin. High Counselor Theron had prepared for death. For 2 months, he had watched the Krath warships circling his world like vultures, waiting for a dying animal to finally stop breathing. He had held the hands of frightened children and told them everything would be fine. He had lied, because hope was all he had left to give. Now, standing in the central plaza of the capital city, he watched a strange angular vessel descend through the clouds. It was covered in scorch marks and battle damage, proof that it had fought in the conflict that had lit up the sky only hours ago. It was not beautiful like Veluxi ships. It was rough, practical, built for war. It was the most wonderful thing Theron had ever seen. The ship landed with a heavy thud that shook the ground. Steam hissed from cooling vents. For a long moment, nothing happened. The gathered Veluxi held their breath, their large eyes fixed on the metal ramp at the front of the vessel. Then the ramp lowered, and figures emerged. Theron had never seen anything like them. They walked on 2 legs, like the Veluxi, but that was where the similarity ended. They had no feathers, only smooth skin in various shades from pale to dark brown. Their eyes faced forward, the unmistakable mark of a predator species. Their movements were confident and controlled, like hunters who feared nothing. The leader of the group removed a helmet from its head. She had dark skin and short black hair, and when she smiled, Theron could see that her teeth were designed for eating meat. "High Counselor Theron?" the creature said. Its voice was translated by a small device on its chest, converting its strange sounds into Veluxi language. "I am Commander Nina Rias, representing the United Earth Coalition. We heard your call." Theron's translation device worked to process the alien words. United Earth Coalition. He did not know what Earth was or where it might be, but he understood the meaning behind the words. "You came," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. "We sent that signal expecting nothing. We were hoping for a miracle that we did not believe would happen. And you came." Commander Ray stepped forward and extended her hand. It was a strange gesture, and Theron did not understand its meaning. But he reached out with his own feathered hand and touched hers, and something passed between them that moment. Trust, gratitude, the beginning of friendship. "We could not ignore your call," Ray said. "Where we come from, we believe that no one should be left alone in the darkness. When someone asks for help, we answer." Behind her, more humans were emerging from the shuttle and from other vessels that had landed nearby. They carried boxes and equipment, medical supplies, and food. They moved with purpose and efficiency, setting up stations and organizing work teams. A tall man with gentle eyes and gray hair in his temples approached one of the wounded Veluxi who lay on a stretcher near the plaza. He knelt beside the patient and began examining the injuries with careful hands. "I am Dr. Samuel Grant," he said to the frightened Veluxi. "I am a healer. I am here to help you. Do not be afraid." The patient stared at the human with wide eyes. Here was a predator, a creature built for hunting and killing, and yet its touch was soft. Its voice was kind. It was treating wounds instead of causing them. Across the plaza, similar scenes were playing out everywhere. Human Marines were helping to clear rubble from damaged buildings. Engineers were assessing power systems and offering to help with repairs. Medical teams were treating the sick and injured with technology that seemed almost magical to the Veluxi observers. High Counselor. Theron walked through the chaos with Commander Reyes at his side. Everywhere he looked, he saw humans working to help his people. They asked for nothing in return. They simply saw suffering and moved to end it. I do not understand, Theron said finally. You have come from so far away. You risked your ships and your lives against the Krath. Why would you do this for strangers? Reyes thought about the question for a moment. It is difficult to explain, she said. Our species has a complicated history. We have done terrible things to each other over the centuries. Wars, cruelty, destruction. But we have also learned from our mistakes. We have learned that the only way forward is together. When we received your signal, we saw people in trouble. We saw people who needed help. Everything else was simple. Theron shook his head in wonder. The Krath are predators like you, but they use their strength to conquer and destroy. You use your strength to protect and heal. How can two predator species be so different? Being a predator does not make you evil, Reyes said. It is a choice. Every species, every individual, must choose what they will do with their power. The Krath chose to dominate others. We chose a different path. They walked in silence for a while, passing through streets where Veluxi citizens were emerging from their shelters for the first time in months. They stared at the humans with a mixture of fear and fascination. Some of the younger ones approached cautiously, curious about these strange new creatures. A human marine named Amy Lawson crouched down to meet a small Veluxi child who had wandered away from its parents. The child was trembling, clearly afraid of the large predator in front of it. Lawson smiled gently and reached into her pocket. She pulled out a small piece of chocolate and offered it to the child. The little Veluxi looked at the strange brown square with confusion. It is food, Lawson said through her translator. It is sweet. Try it. The child carefully took the chocolate and bit into it. Its eyes went wide with surprise, and then its beak curved into something that might have been a smile. It chirped happily and ran back to its parents, showing them the strange gift from the human. Nearby, Sergeant Carlos Mendez was helping a group of Veluxi workers lift a heavy beam that had fallen across a doorway, trapping people inside. The Veluxi could barely move the beam, even with all of them working together. Mendez grabbed one end by himself and lifted it with a grunt of effort, holding it while the trapped citizens escaped. One of the Veluxi workers stared at him with amazement. You are very strong, he said. Mendez shrugged. Earth is a heavy world. We have to be strong just to walk around. The worker did not understand what that meant, but he understood the result. These humans had come from a difficult place, and that difficulty had made them powerful. Powerful enough to defeat the Krath. Powerful enough to lift beams and break blockades. And yet, for all their power, they used it to help others dot as the day turned to evening. High Counselor Theron called a gathering in the central plaza. Thousands of Veluxi citizens assembled, along with hundreds of humans who had come down from the fleet. The two species stood together under the stars, looking up at the sky where the battle had been fought. Theron stepped onto a raised platform and addressed the crowd. Today, our world was saved, he said. For months, we waited for the end. We sent our message into the darkness, hoping that someone might hear. We did not believe anyone would come. But these beings, these humans, they heard us. They crossed the vastness of space to help people they had never met. They fought against impossible odds. They won. He turned to look at Commander Reyes, who stood nearby with Captain Shaw and the other human officers. I do not know what the future holds, Theron continued. I do not know if the Krath will return or what challenges await us. But I know this. Today, we made friends. Today, we learned that we are not alone in the universe. Today, everything changed. The crowd erupted in cheers and song. Veluxi voices rose into the night sky, a beautiful melody of hope and gratitude. And standing among them, the humans listened and smiled. They had come to answer a call for help. They had found something more. They had found a place in the galaxy. Captain Shaw stood beside Commander Reyes and watched the celebration. Somewhere above them, the fleet maintained its watch, alert for any sign of craft reinforcements. The war was not over. It was just beginning. But for tonight, at least, there was peace. And that was enough. The news spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Every species with access to interstellar communication heard the story within days. An unknown civilization from an uncharted world had appeared from nowhere, destroyed half a craft blockade fleet, and rescued the Veluxi from certain doom. The Galactic Assembly, a gathering of representatives from over 100 species, called an emergency session for the first time in 300 cycles. The great hall on the neutral world of Nexus Prime, filled with delegates of every shape, size, and color. Some breathed oxygen, some methane, some nitrogen. Some had 4 legs, some had tentacles, some floated on anti-gravity fields. But all of them had one thing in common. They wanted to know about the humans. Delegate Crix of the Morvani Collective demanded answers first. He was a being of blue crystal, his voice a harmonious chime that echoed through the chamber. Who are these Terrans? Where do they come from? And why have we never encountered them before? Delegate Sola of the Pelori Union raised one of her 6 arms. She was insect-like, with compound eyes that reflected the light in rainbow patterns. More importantly, how did 12 of their ships defeat 30 Krath vessels? The Krath have been terrorizing this sector for centuries. No one has ever defeated them so decisively. The Krath ambassador, a scarred warrior named Thras, stood in the corner of the chamber with a dark expression on his scaled face. He said nothing, but his anger filled the room like a storm cloud. The answers came 3 weeks later. When a human delegation arrived at Nexus Prime, Admiral Patricia Vance led the group. She had spent her entire career preparing humanity for its place among the stars, and now that moment had finally arrived. Beside her walked Captain Daniel Shaw, Commander Nina Reyes, and Ambassador Carmen Ortega, a diplomatic specialist who had been chosen to represent humanity's interests. The assembly fell silent as the humans entered the chamber. Hundreds of alien eyes watched them with curiosity, fear, and wonder. These were the Deathworlders. These were the beings who had done the impossible. Admiral Vance stepped up to the central speaking platform and looked out at the gathered delegates. She showed no fear, no hesitation. Her voice was strong and clear. Representatives of the Galactic Assembly, she began. I am Admiral Patricia Vance of the United Earth Coalition. We come from a world you would likely classify as a death world, a planet of extreme conditions that most species would find uninhabitable. We call it Earth. We call it home. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. A death world species. That explained much. Vance continued. For thousands of years, humans lived alone on our planet, unaware that other intelligent life existed in the universe. 3 weeks ago, we received a distress signal from the Veluxi people. They were under siege by the Krath Dominion. They were asking for help. She paused and looked around the chamber. We could have ignored that signal. We could have stayed hidden and safe in our own system. But that is not who we are. When someone calls for help, we answer. That is the human way. Delegate Crix chimed a question. But how did you defeat the Krath? Their fleet was larger. Their technology is well established. You are newcomers to space travel. Captain Shaw stepped forward to answer. With respect, Delegate, the Krath had never fought a species from a death world before. Our planet has shaped us in ways they did not expect. We are stronger than most species because our gravity is heavier. We are more resilient because our environment is more dangerous. And we use weapons that the Krath were not prepared for. Kinetic weapons, Delegate Sola said slowly. You use solid projectiles instead of energy beams. Primitive but effective against shields designed to stop energy attacks. Shaw nodded. Sometimes the simplest solution is the best one. Ambassador Ortega took her turn to speak. She was a small woman with kind eyes and a warm voice that seemed to calm the tension in the room. We did not come here to frighten anyone or to start a war. We came because we believe that all intelligent beings have value. We believe that the strong should protect the weak. We believe that no one should have to face the darkness alone. She gestured toward the Krath ambassador, who stiffened with anger. The Krath Dominion has spent centuries conquering peaceful worlds and enslaving their populations. We are here to say that this will not continue. Any species that asks for our help will receive it. Any aggressor who threatens innocent lives will face the consequences. The chamber erupted in noise. Some delegates cheered. Others protested. The Krath ambassador stormed out of the hall, his scales flushed dark with rage. When the noise finally died down, High Counselor Theron of the Veluxi stepped forward. He had traveled to the assembly as a witness, to tell his people's story and to speak on behalf of humanity. I was prepared to watch my species die, he said quietly. The Krath had surrounded our world. We had no weapons, no fleet, no way to fight back. We sent our signal into the void as a final act of hope, expecting nothing but silence. His voice grew stronger. Instead, the humans came. They asked for nothing in return. They fought for us, bled for us, saved us. And then they stayed to help us rebuild. He turned to face Admiral Vance directly. Where I come from, we have a word for beings who risk everything to help strangers. We call them heroes. The humans are heroes. And I am proud to call them friends. The Assembly voted that day to officially recognize the United Earth Coalition as a member of the galactic community. It was not unanimous, but it was overwhelming. Humanity had earned its place among the stars. In the weeks that followed, the news continued to spread. Stories of the battle at Veluxi Prime were told on 1,000 worlds. The image of human ships charging into the Krath blockade became a symbol of hope for oppressed peoples everywhere. And on Earth, people looked up at the night sky with new eyes. They were no longer alone. They were part of something bigger than themselves. Admiral Vance returned home to a hero's welcome. She stood before the United Earth Coalition and delivered her report. We have made first contact with the galactic community, she said. We have made friends and enemies. We have shown the universe what humanity is capable of. But this is only the beginning. The Krath will return. Other threats will emerge. We must be ready. She paused and looked at the faces before her, the leaders of a species that had finally found its place in the cosmos. The galaxy is vast and ancient and full of wonders we cannot imagine. There are species out there who need our help, allies waiting to be found, and mysteries waiting to be solved. We have taken our first steps into a larger universe. Her voice dropped to a whisper that somehow filled the entire chamber. Let us make sure those steps count. Somewhere, on a small blue planet orbiting an ordinary yellow star, a child looked up at the night sky and dreamed of the future. The stars were no longer distant and unreachable. They were destinations. They were doorways. They were home and out in the darkness, wherever suffering existed, wherever the helpless cried out for aid. One thought brought comfort to those who had lost hope. The humans are listening. The humans will come. The Deathworlders have arrived.